neopixel glasses. Alright. 24 by 24. And here is what you need to make them. The print bed on this one, you put your supports only touching the print bed. You don't want the supports in the hole here, and you certainly don't want the supports in the hole that holds the wire that goes between the two. We've got two neopixel rings, sidearm, and we're gonna, you can see the hole in this one. That one, there was no supports. Because the other arm has all of these supports, we actually had to put supports for the hole that's going to be, that's going to have the wires in it, so we're going to have to drill that out. And we should get working cleaning these up. I just use a pair of pliers, clean them up with pliers. Pull it out. Sometimes it comes out nice and easy, and sometimes it does not. Kind of a mixed bag there. And it doesn't leave a very nice finish inside, but that's okay because the rings are going to be in the way there. Now that they're all out of the way, you can see that there is a little hole right here. Hopefully you can see that, but that's where the wire goes through. In through the bridge here. The other hole, I didn't quite clean this one up yet, I'll finish that. Maybe I'll show you this side. There we are. The hole here is where the wires can go out and then go down the arm. So now it's time to clean up the arm. Thing to note, you got to clean up this outside first, or clean up the outside separately than the inside. The inside does take a bit to do, but outside isn't bad. Comes off pretty easily. File that down if you wish, although it's not critical because no one's going to see it. Gets a little harder once you're inside, but you can twist and pull, and eventually all of this stuff will come out and you'll be able to see right through this. So it's a challenge to get this emptied, but you can do it. I ended up using a screwdriver to push it through and clean it out with. So you can see this part here is where the processor goes. So the Arduino Nano just slides right in there. And then the batteries go in behind it, right in here. That makes this side heavy. So we've got the processor. The other stuff that we're going to use, the other parts, we've got the pins, and I've sanded the edges of those so they're a little smoother and easier to put in. The holes on this one we can drill out if we want to make it run a little smoother with those pins. The LEDs, 24 LED rings, 2 of those, connector for the battery. And the battery, what I used was 280 milliamp batteries, and I put them in series and put a connector on it. Now the connector I got off eBay, couldn't tell you what kind it is, but it is a cheap connector. Connector for the Arduino, and that is what I'm using as a switch because I don't plan on turning it on and off often. And some ribbon cable. File to clean it all up. And the drill bit to clean out the hole where the wire is going to run right there. This one here. Because you have to print it with supports, you have to have something there to clean that hole out. So I'm going to clean up these parts, and then we'll start soldering. Now that the parts are cleaned up, there's a nice hole in this one, drilled out, and then I gave it a little sanding with the cheap nail file or emery board. So it's time to start putting these things together. The LEDs, the top end where you see all the connectors, well, that top end, LED number 0, is going to be this one right here. And if you put that at the top of the glasses, what that's going to do is allow you to do a few more fancy tricks with your glasses by being able to start at the top of both and going around. Otherwise your code would be really, really complicated. So think about having the wire start at the top, go through, and then go to the top for the one between them, and then the wire for the processor start at the top, go over to the hole, and then out through. So we'll cut those lengths and we'll show you soldering. Right. Well, we've got a wire. It's cut, I would say, probably an extra inch to make sure that if we need to, well, let's just say it's easier to cut something shorter than it is to try and cut it longer. So I always leave a little extra on these things, and we'll cut it off once the first one's soldered and glued in. First thing we're going to do for this, we're going to tin both ends. I've already done this one. You can see there's a little bit, oh, it's hard to tell if it's in focus there. There's a little bit of solder on each of these, and I will do the same with the wire. So the ground's on, I'll put the input on, and since my red wire was in the center, I'll just push it over. Now to put these in, I just folded the wire back. It's not really going to matter much because there's going to be a lot of hot glue in here eventually, but if we think about sticking that right at the top, so we've got the first one in, and you can see a little bit of the red wire there. If you don't like to see that wire, you know, the great solution to that is a Sharpie. Just color the wire if you don't want to see it. Alright, so we've got it through the centerpiece there, in through the hole, the other one's soldered on. We're going to bring it up to the top and try and get it close to the top. You can see I got a little bit extra here. I'm going to cut it off about here and solder the next one on. Something I didn't mention is that there is an in and out on these rings. So there's a ground VCC and in, and a ground VCC and out. The second one, of course, it has to go to in, but on the first one that has both connected, where it comes from the Arduino processor into the neopixel ring and then out to the other ring, the one that comes from the other ring is, of course, out from this one, and that way you've got a continuous continuous line of these LEDs and processors. So I'll just solder that on now. Looks like it's going to be close. I'll also solder on the other wire that goes out to the processor, and I'll just leave it the full length of what I've got left. So a couple of words of warning. Before you hot glue the neopixel rings in, probably a good idea to make sure it works, because the connections are going to be behind the glue and you don't want to try and pry that off. The other thing, you see the little post that's in here? Well, that pin or post, you should dry fit that before you put any of the wiring in, because what I do notice is it's very tight. I used a small reamer. I find that the 3/16 drill bit on the glasses part itself, it's just too big. I used it on the posts. The posts it was fine, but I used a 5mm reamer on the glasses themselves. The post sits in very stiff into the lens portion, and on the arms it's just fine. So I've run the wire through the hole, through the other hole in the arm, through the case that holds the Arduino. Now they share a common ground with the battery, so I've soldered the ground and the battery terminal or wires together, just just to make it easier to put it into the Arduino ground hole. And we soldered them onto the top of the processor, like through the top in the holes. I'll show you that after. So if we take a look at the board, you can see that the first pin is V in, and the great part about these nano boards is they've got a 5-volt regulator in them. So we've got V in, that's the first one, so the red from the battery goes there. The black from the battery and the ground for the LEDs goes into the second pin called ground. And third, fourth, the 5-volt pin is where the VCC is what they call it on the neopixel board. VCC goes there, and the Arduino code calls, the one that I supplied with this project, calls for the signal pin, or the in pin on the neopixel ring, goes to D3, or the digital 3. You could change that if you wanted. In fact, I think it'd probably be okay to change it to the analog and just configure it and then have all of them on the other side, but I didn't do that, so there you go. If you want to change it and change the code, please feel free to do a remix. Anyway, I'll put this all together and we'll test it to make sure they actually work, and well, I'll program the Arduino and then we'll glue them in place. The nice part, once you've programmed the Arduino, the computer USB port will actually power the LEDs in the mode that they're in, because we've got them on pretty low power. So it all seems to be functioning. Time to glue stuff in. Alright, so these are glued in. Something I did notice as you're gluing them in, you'll see there's some deformities back here. That was the hot glue. Apparently hot glue and plastic go very well together. Ha 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 ha. They turned out alright. So now these in. Now you too can be ridiculously good looking. Alright. NeoPixel glasses.